And I grew up on a farm, like really kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Mhm.
And so I had a lot of time to myself. And so comics were a big, kind of escapism for me.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of time to focus, on one thing. And so I would just sit and draw, just to kind of pass time because it was literally all I had to do. If I wasn't out with my family, like working, then drawing and comics was all there was for me. And so, I guess.
When did it start to take more of a professional? When did you think you could actually sort of, do
Well, I mean, so like I was about 12 when the Image Comics boom happened in the 90s, and I met Kirkman around that time. We were both in history class, the same history class,
Right.
and so the teacher I think knew that we were both big comics nerds and sat us next to each other, and we hit it off, and we knew each other, pretty much the whole way through school. Like I was the president of art club and he was the vice president of art club. Like we played Dungeons and Dragons and stuff together. And so, I don't know, I think I always knew I wanted to be an artist, but even, like going into college, I wasn't sure if I could like make a career out of it, So I always had like a contingency plan that I was probably gonna have to have like some other career and then, make art like a sideline or whatever. But I got really lucky, I guess, and I got offered a pretty good scholarship to art school, and so I went and spent my first year at the Art Academy in Cincinnati, and around the time I want to say maybe halfway through the year, Kirkman gave me a call and said, "Hey, I think I want to do some comics. Do you want to try this out?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so I went down there and spent maybe a week or so hanging out with him, and gosh, it was like a feverish week. I mean, within that week, we had kind of put together, the basics of what would become Battle Pope,
Yep.
and we built a company, and by the end of it, we had like a functioning website, and had been to the state capitol and filed our articles of incorporation and had it like kind of off and running. We
So
were
it's
both-
truly independent, like.
Yeah, I mean, when we started the company, it was just the two of us doing the books, and we had no idea how to make comic books. Like, we knew what they were supposed to look like when they were finished, and that was basically it. And so we kind of reverse engineered the process from there. And, over the course of, several years, we learned, all the things that we were doing wrong, which was most of it. And eventually, kind of got the hang of it and got to meet more people who were doing it professionally and, figure out how to do things the right way. And we had a lot of, so if you read those early Battle Pope issues, like all of our growing pains are right there on the page.
Right.
Like we, the first several issues of that book are basically us just trying to learn how to make comics. We did that for a while and kind of got the attention of some guys at Image and started talking to them about some projects. And our friend Val Staples, who colored most of the Battle Pope covers, was a giant He-Man fan and basically ponied up his life savings for the He-Man license so that he could publish He-Man comics.
Yep.
And then when he got it, he reached out and said, "Hey, I want to do some origin stories for these villains. Do you guys want to try to put this stuff together?" And
Right.
so, we had kind of a small stable of creators that we worked with, putting together Battle Pope and a couple other books that we published. And so we were kind of the original stable, I guess, for Val. And so that was the first book that paid me an actual paycheck.
Right,
was doing the Beast Man origin story for He-Man books. And so, yeah, at that point, I was nearing the end of my college career.
Yep.
I'd basically done all of my BFA except for like 2 classes. I had like a math class and a communications class, but I'd already done like my show, like my graduation show and everything. So I was more or less finished.
And was that was Cincinnati that you?
No, I went to. I started in Cincinnati, and it was an incredibly expensive private school. So even with the nice scholarship that I had, like it was still just brutal.
Yeah.
And so my second year on, I moved down to the University of Louisville. Because I'm from Kentucky, so it was an in-state college, and it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
And finished out basically the rest of my BFA there. And then, like I said, I got offered a job that paid me money, even though it was like more or less a pittance compared to like, you know, what I would make as a living wage, you know.
Sure.
You know, just a few years later.
Yep.
Like when that first job hit, I felt like I'd won the lottery.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I walked into UPS and told them I was done throwing boxes around and quit my job and told my mom, and she said that was the stupidest thing I could have done. And then I figured, like, well, this is it. This is baptism by fire here. I'm gonna, you know, float on this one paycheck until I get my next job.
Right. Keep plugging
and
away.
then just keep hopping from paycheck to paycheck. And so yeah, we did, like I said, we did Battle Pope and stuff for about, I want to say, close to 4 years, maybe a little over 4 years, all put together. Before we started with The Walking Dead, and you know, we had kind of we did a book called Brit. That was kind of a test run for us to figure out the process that we were going to use for Walking Dead. So, like, I knew we were going to do it in black and white, so I wanted to do black and white art that was tailored to be printed in black and white, because at the time a lot of books that were printed with gray tones were generally books that had been colored, but then they couldn't afford it in color, so they just flattened it to black and white and printed it. So if you look at a lot of black and white comics from around then, the head shading in them, they were usually like every part of the page was some tone of gray, and it just felt like heavy and too much. So I'd spent a lot of time drawing in charcoal and doing a lot of black and white art in college, and I'd used Photoshop quite a bit, but I wasn't very good at it. So I thought, I'm gonna learn how to do what I do on paper in Photoshop, and so I tried to tailor the art for comics, you know, try to figure out how to do the shaded work that I wanted to do, and make it like what I had been doing, you know, in my fine art stuff. And so yeah, we used Brit to kind of figure out how that was going to work, and then you know, come Halloween, they launched Walking Dead with a handful of other monster titles.
When did you guys know that one was a hit? At what point did it kind of, or seem like it was, you know, going well?
Well, I mean, it was kind of a wild ride because, you know, like I said, the month that Walking Dead launched, there was a handful of other monster titles, and you know, we were the zombie one, and there was a Frankenstein one, and a werewolf one, and a vampire one, I think, and you know, within, you know, probably 6 months, like it was like we were, you know, a fighter squadron, and we were flying in formation, and we were just kind of watching the other guys drop off, you know, we had done plenty of books that nobody read, so it's not like we weren't used to that. And then I'd say after the first trade paperback came out, that was when retailers started to really give it a little more backing. And it kind of just took off from there. So yeah, that was it.
Cool.
The rest is kind of
history.
history.
Exactly. The often in the shop we get asked, what advice would you give to someone who's, wants to get into this business, especially the art side of it?
Yeah, I get this one a lot too. I would say that comics is kind of like being in an abusive relationship. And this is not to advocate being in an abusive relationship, but comics, especially the art side, is brutal, and it beats you up a lot. And you just have to be basically so eaten up with the sickness for it that it doesn't matter how bad it gets. Like, you're never gonna walk away from it.
Right.
So I always tell people, like, if you can think of anything else that you could do with your life, you should probably go do that thing. Because yeah, if you want to do comics, chances are like that's all you want to do, or at least that's most of what you want to do.
Right.
Yeah, because it will, it's a heartbreaking business. There are a lot of aspects of the business that no one who wants to get into cartooning gets into it because they won't have their heart broken by all these other things.
Right.
But it's gonna happen.
Yeah. So you gotta be thick-skinned, definitely.
Yeah, you gotta have thick skin. You gotta harden your heart. But that said, it is the singular most rewarding career I think I could have ever chosen. Just to see books on the stands and to talk to kids and know that the experience that I had reading some of my first comics and the things that got me super inspired to become a creator, that the books I've done are that for some kid out there. Like,
yeah, definitely.
That's crazy, and like it's super humbling and such an honor, and it's honestly the most that's probably the most rewarding aspect of the entire job, honestly.
No, awesome. You were comparing, and then I'll turn it over to people that have questions. You've had a couple quiet nights here in Stockholm, and maybe you share with us that life wasn't always like that. Was it downtown Cincinnati you were living in when you were younger?
Yeah, well, like I said, I grew up on a farm, and I was in the middle of nothing forever. And so as soon as I got a chance to get off the farm, I was like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I have no doubt. And so I had to move into the city and be in the thick of it and see everything and be everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was kind of exhausting. The thing that broke me was I was living in downtown Cincinnati around the time, right after the movie Traffic came out, and they filmed that on the strip in Cincinnati, where it's the only place that you could be out and have like technology and cameras and stuff, and not just expect a bunch of guys to just roll up on you and pull out guns and steal it all. It was a really rough area for a long time, where just because the sign said stop didn't mean it was a good idea.
Right. Right.
And so yeah, we would lay in the apartment at night and count the gunshots, and we play this game, gunshots or firecrackers. It was always gunshots. We knew it. I had to walk my dogs out on the median of the highway because the park was too dangerous. And one time I was out walking the dogs, and I saw this glistening in the grass, and I reached down, and it was bullets, just fistfuls of AK-47 cartridges. And so I called the police, and they said, "Oh yeah, we got that guy. He was just ditching weapons all up and down the highway." And so the police, I was like, "Well, are you guys gonna send somebody?" And they're like, "Well, sure." So I waited behind a tree, and I had my dogs on. Like, the tree was about as big around as my arm, but it was all I could hide behind. And the cop comes. He's like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna be finding this shit out here for weeks." And I was like, "I live above a Montessori school. Like, maybe how about I don't find it? How about you find it right now?" And so that was it for me. Like, that broke me on city life. I had to get out of there. And then I moved to the suburbs, and I was surrounded by, 100 people, and I hated that. maybe even more. Like it's easier to be alone in the city than it is in the suburbs. And then that broke me of just being around people at all. And so then I moved out to the sticks. Like I honestly could stand to move out even further. Like I wouldn't mind living so far away that it's hard work to even think about me. But I've got a nice open private spread now. So like the only people I see most weeks that aren't related to me are like the UPS drivers, like FedEx. That's about it.
All right.
Cool.
Should we open it up here, Mr.
Yeah, I
Max?
think.
Yeah.
Om det är okej för er så tänkte jag att vi skulle börja så här vänster till höger så att man liksom kan på något sätt förbereda sig för sin fråga så att man inte bara blir handsräckning. Så vi börjar så här. Om ni är intresserade av att fråga Tony någonting så räcker ni upp en hand.
Good job. You always need that first one, yeah.
Ja, vi börjar.
I wondered, what's the average time of writing a comic book?
Writing a comic or drawing? I would say, well, at Marvel I get about 6 weeks for an issue. So 20 pages in 6 weeks. And some guys can do it faster. For me, 6 weeks is pretty grueling. 6 weeks. That's a lot of 16 plus hour days. Basically wake up, work, sleep like maybe 6 hours, wake up and stare at a cup of coffee for 2 hours, and then try to get back into working. So 6 weeks is a pretty fair clip for me. I could manage maybe, if I had like 8-9 weeks, I'd be a little more comfortable. But on a publishing schedule, 6 is probably about what you're gonna get. So if you can do a page like every day and a half, if you can spend a day and a half for every page, that's a pretty good. If you can do a page in a day, that's even better.
Okay, why did you stop drawing Walking Dead?
Unfortunately, I can't really get into the nuts and bolts of that. Sorry.
Okej, det var den. Här hade vi en nästa.
Well, I have a lot of questions, but I can begin with one.
Sure.
That's what we're here.
Yeah, I would like to begin with what kind of creators, writers, and artists did you enjoy growing up, inspire you, and still inspire you?
Well, the guys who started Mad Magazine are kind of my go-to heroes. I learned to read from Mad Magazine, and so Jack Davis, Will Elder, John Severin, who did a lot of work for Cracked magazine. All these guys came from EC Comics before Mad Magazine. EC Comics published Tales from the Crypt and a lot of horror books and stuff like that. So the Comics Code Authority that you see on old Spider-Man and stuff like that, basically the Comics Code Authority in the US in the 1950s was the communist witch hunt, and they were trying to look for anything that was un-American, and they linked juvenile delinquency to comic books, and there was this whole to-do. They dragged comics creators into the Senate and interrogated them, and they really focused on Bill Gaines, who was the publisher of Mad Magazine and EC Comics, and Archie Comics and a lot of other publishers saw like EC was the giant in the industry. They're outselling everybody. They were the guys on the scene, and basically they used it as an opportunity to gang up on them and put them out of business. So the Comics Code Authority is a self-imposed censorship in comics, and they used it as a way to say no supernatural stuff, no crime, no vampires, no, blood on the cover, all kinds of stuff. It was basically like all of the bread and butter of EC Comics was now outlawed in comics. And so Bill Gaines basically was like, okay, if I can't do this stuff in comics, I'm going to do it in a magazine. And so he took all of his guys from Tales from the Crypt and Two-Fisted Tales and all of his different comic books and put them in a magazine, and that's how Mad Magazine was born. And so all of these artists, whenever I'm trying to solve a problem, I can always turn to like Jack Davis or Wally Wood or any of those guys that work for EC Comics because they've already solved all the problems that I can come up against. So those guys are my absolute heroes. But I'm also a 90s kid, so Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Dale Keown, like all the Image guys made a big impact on me when I was a kid. And so there's a definite influence there, like the kind of bombastic, extreme nature of their stuff, still kind of in me also. And then a lot of indie stuff too. So guys like, Robert Crumb, Dan Clowes, Bob Fingerman, trying to think of, all kinds of stuff. Like the Zap Comics guys, I love all that stuff. So I don't know, I like kind of everything.
Ja.
I was wondering, how would you compare working for big publishers such as Marvel to create your own stuff? Was it something you have to think about, or was it terrifying at first?
A bit. I had some personal struggles at Marvel, in that it's hard to not personally invest like your whole heart into books when it's all you've ever done. Every book I'd had before I worked at Marvel was my own book, so it was my baby. And I loved it and I nurtured it and I didn't have to worry about getting fired off of it because it was my book. But when I got to Marvel, they need their stuff like clockwork, and I'm sitting there trying to baby it and give it every ounce of love that I can put into it. And when I'm late, they don't care. And so I had to realize that I had to kind of distance my heart from the work a little bit because at the end of the day, it's not my book. I had to basically, as Jason Latour put it when I was talking to him, he said, sometimes you have to recognize that you're just working the fries. You're just at the fast food place making French fries. They're not your fries. You just gotta cook them and get them out the door. And that's true. And it's a hard thing to grapple with kind of emotionally as you're working on it. But, once you kind of become at peace with the nature of that relationship, then you can find a way to, work within it and move okay. So by the time I got to Deadpool, they offered me Deadpool, and honestly, I didn't give a shit about Deadpool as a character. For decades, it was not a character I was super interested in. But they said I was going to be working with Brian Posehn and Jerry Duggan, and I was all about it. So then I thought, well, this will be a great chance for me to prove to Marvel that I can draw a book in 6 weeks, prove to myself that I can draw a book in 6 weeks, and have some fun. And so I was fortunate. I'd been working on a book at Vertigo, and it was kind of a horror-ish book called The Exterminators. And it was weird and funny, but I was trying to be serious and dark with the art and trying to make it realistic and stuff. And I was basically trying to ignore my tendencies as a cartoonist. Like I said, I grew up reading Mad Magazine, so cartooning is kind of in me. But as soon as you read a complaint about an artist, the first thing they'll say is too cartoony. all the time. And I get it all the time. You know, like my first issue of Punisher, the first response I read online was, "What is this Fred Hedbeck shit?" And I was like, well, you should be so lucky as to have Fred Hedbeck drawing your book. But, so yeah, and so I was trying to like choke the cartooning out and make it, you know, whatever. And I talked to Jack Davis on the phone for a little bit to get him to paint a cover for Fear Agent, and like kind of a shitheel, I was art directing him a little bit, and I felt really guilty about it. And he said, you know, I just wanted to have some fun with it. You know, I'm 82 years old, and you know, I was like, shit. Like, you don't get to be 82 and still doing this if you're not having fun with it. And like that was like a turning point for me. And I realized like if I'm not having fun with it, I could just, you know, like I could make, you know, the money you make drawing comics is not that great of money. So I can make that money doing almost literally anything else. And so, you know, if I'm not having fun drawing comics, then why am I drawing comics? You know, so like that, you know, kind of gave me a resolve, like, you know, like find a way to have fun with it and just do that. And so with Deadpool, it's like, I'm not gonna pretend I'm not a cartoonist anymore. I'm just gonna do it. Like if something's a little weird, like just go with it. And so yeah, that changed my whole life, and kind of I don't know, got my mind right on how to actually do that kind of a book.
I have one.
I don't know if that answered your question.
What are some of your current creators, artists, writers that you enjoy working with, or even just maybe you haven't even worked with them, but some of the people in the industry that you just really enjoy being around?
Yeah, I like, you know, some of my best friends are the guys whose work I love the most. Southern Bastards, I think, is the best book on the stands. And Jason Latour is one of my oldest friends in comics. His first published work was in Battle Pope, you know, like, so we've known each other for forever. Jason Aaron is a great guy, a really good friend of mine. I used to live in Kansas City, where he's from, and we had like a standing date every Friday that was to just get us out of the house so that we would actually see somebody. We called it Fat Guy Friday, because we would just go out and try to kill ourselves with food for like one afternoon. And and I got to work with him on Ghost Rider for a little bit, and that was an absolute blast. I'm trying to think, like, you know, it's great because, you know, doing this, you kind of get to meet your heroes, and you know, there's always the warning of don't meet your heroes, because it's true, sometimes they're awful. You can meet some guys who are real dicks, and it's heartbreaking. But at the same time, you can meet your heroes and find out they're total sweethearts. I idolized Jeff Darrow, who drew Big Guy and Rusty. He's a Shaolin Cowboy right now. He did a book called Hard Boiled that is maybe my favorite comic ever. I've got a tattoo based on it. And I got to talk to him quite a bit over the years, and he's one of the sweetest guys in the world. So yeah.
I was just wondering, since you've worked on so many titles, which has been the most fun for you to work on?
I would say, all things considered, it's hard to say. I mean, like, Fear Agent was super rewarding because it's a creator-owned book, and so, you know, like, that was built from scratch, you know, so everything in that book came from nothing, and so that was really fun to build a whole universe from nothing. But working with Brian Posehn and Jerry Duggan on Deadpool was awesome. You know, the work relationship with Marvel was super stressful, but working with Brian and Jerry was one of the highlights of my career. Like, I loved working with those guys. It was super fun. You know, like I said, I could kind of lean on my Mad Magazine influences, and do it in a superhero comic, in a mainstream superhero comic, like probably, you know, of the stuff that's not Walking Dead, I'd say Deadpool's probably the thing that's had the most readership. And so I like to push the envelope as much as I can. So like I feel like if I'm not getting away with something, then I don't really want to do it. And I think kids especially enjoy reading things that they feel like they shouldn't be reading. And so if I can help provide that, I feel like that's kind of my personal calling. And so I tried to put as much just awful shit as I could into that book, and totally got away with it. And so yeah, I mean, all things considered, I'd say that was probably the most fun.
I was wondering if you have any tips on how to get better at drawing more efficiently.
Oh, jeez, I might be the exact wrong guy to ask that. My drawing process over the years, I would say do your layouts small, because, you know, 11 by 17 is a big picture, you know, it's a lot to think about. But if you can focus on the most crucial aspects of that, so if you do your layout like 2 inches by 3 inches, you don't have room to think about any of the little noodly shit. Like you don't have room. So you only focus on the most important parts, and then always work from the general to the specific. So have your entire picture laid out and put before you start drawing. You know, you don't want to start on like a face and then get to the foot and realize the whole figure is wrecked. So if you have the whole framework laid down before you finish any of it, you can notice like, oh, you know, his leg is way too short, you know, whatever. And you can fix all those things and nip it in the bud. You're gonna find a lot less heartbreak. And yeah, that's the biggest thing that I know a lot of people struggle with. I'm trying to think of what else. It's weird because I sound like, you know, the work will always expand to fit whatever time or whatever you got to a lot. So if you got a lot of time, you're gonna work on the same thing for a long time to fill that whole space. That's just how, if you got a day to do it, you're gonna take a day. If you got 2 weeks, you're gonna take 2 weeks. So kind of my whole process is I streamline things only to fill it up with other parts. So, you know, like if I streamline my layout process, then that just gives me more time to do the little noodly detail stuff. And, you know, but eventually I have to learn like when's enough and like let it go. And you know, where in the process do I have to recognize that it's the parts of the drawing, the things I don't draw are just as important as the things I do draw. You know, so there's guys like Mike Mignola who could draw like a whole, awesome, you know, you feel stone or whatever, and he just puts like 4 little check marks on a rectangle, and you're like, oh, that's a stone pillar. Where I'll sit and draw like the marbling and the shading and the specks and the splatter and whatever, and it's like, you know, like the reader's going to spend the same 2 seconds. They're looking and go, oh, that's marble. Well, that's marble. So I'm like, how do I make that more efficient? I don't know.
How long did it take you to learn Photoshop?
It's still kind of an ongoing process, I guess. I would say I got most of it down within a couple of years. I mean, the bulk of what I know about Photoshop, I learned within a couple of years. That said, like I don't understand how colorists color books so quickly, because I have a colorist friend who I lean on for a lot of work, especially like my Marvel covers and stuff, and I can hand him the inks, and within 2 hours he'll shoot me back the cover colored. And I'm like, son of a bitch, how did you do that? Because like I get the thing and it takes me 2 days, like back-breaking days, to get the thing colored, and you know, and there's barely any difference. So I don't know how he does it. all I know is like how I paint and handle color, you know, in the real world. And I just try to kind of apply that to Photoshop, which is probably the least efficient way to do it, apparently, just judging from how quickly my color spreads do work. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was wondering, do you have a bucket list, or is there something you like to do in future? Creators you like to work with, or yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to draw Jonah Hex. I love genre stuff. I almost got to draw Jonah Hex. I was like so close. The writers had written the script for me, and I was working on stuff at Marvel, and they said, take your time, just get to it when you get to it. When you're done, we'll plug it in. You know, it's an evergreen issue. It's not like storyline dependent. So you do what you're gonna do. When you get it, and it'll be great. And so I've been kind of on these, you know, large-ish projects in Marvel, and I finally got them wrapped up, and you know, my plate was empty, and all right, I'm gonna draw Jonah Hex. And so I sat down, I started doing my breakdowns. I worked on them for maybe half an evening or whatever, and then woke up the next morning and checked the news sites and saw Jonah Hex had been canceled. So yeah, I want to do that one eventually. I'd like to draw Lobo. I love Lobo. I grew up on Lobo. Yeah, I'd like to work with Jason Aaron some more. I want to do more of my own stuff. All my heroes write and draw their own stuff. You know, all of the like cartoonists that I love. You know, I don't necessarily feel that like I've earned the right to call myself a cartoonist because I don't write and draw my own stuff. Like I don't do what Will Eisner did. I don't do what you know, any of the guys that are my absolute heroes have done. So I want to learn to do that. I want to, you know, feel like I can call myself that and not feel dishonest.
I think we have time for
Cool.
one more if there's one.
And två till.
Okay, two.
I have just one quick question about Eisner, the Eisner Award you got from The Walking Dead. Has it affected your career-wise, opened many doors, bigger paychecks?
Not really. No, I mean I would say like the success of the Walking Dead itself as a type, like the commercial success, definitely has. You know, it's opened a lot of doors for me that were previously shut to me, and you know, it's definitely put me in some places where I know that I probably don't deserve really to be just on the merit of my work. Yeah.
What has been the worst comic you have worked on?
The worst comic I've worked on.
Tough finish.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. I would say Venom was maybe one of the most heartbreaking things I've gotten to work on because I loved doing it. But like they gave me my first script right before Christmas, and so I was late. I was like, guys, you know, like the next 2 weeks are gonna be shot because Christmas is a hellhole for getting work done. Like it's a vacuum of work. It just doesn't happen. And so I never could make up that time. Like I worked on it for, geez, I don't know, probably close to a year. And I was always late because I started my first issue late and I never could make up that time. There's no scenario where I'm ever gonna suddenly be twice as fast and turn the book around. So that was rough. I mean, it was, you know, I was always late, and I always had that editorial pressure. You know, the editor's always breathing down the back of my neck, and you know, handing work off to other guys, and you know, it was heartbreaking because it was something that I got to design the character. I got to basically set the pace for this new title, and then just couldn't work on it because I could never make up that time. you know, honestly, they did a similar thing on Deadpool, because I did the first issue, and I did it in 6 weeks. Or no, I did the first issue, and I was so thrilled because they gave me 6 weeks to do it, and I did it in 4 weeks. First time in my whole life I'd ever finished anything early. And they were like, okay, how quickly do you think you could do issue 2? I was like, probably 6 weeks, but maybe we'll get lucky. I wouldn't hold your breath. And they're like, okay, because we're double shipping issues 1 and 2 that month. So now instead of being 2 weeks early, you're actually 4 weeks late. And I was like, guy, you're killing me. You're absolutely killing me. Like, there's no way, like the fastest guy I know can't do 18 issues in a year. You're never gonna keep this up. And,
Cool.
We have a couple announcements before we run off. One is our friends from Nerded are at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
So you should check them out. We were at Band
Det är bra.
Radio yesterday.
Och sen så har Tony
Yes.
tagit med sig lite prints, lite Deadpool prints som finns i E15 som han signerar.
Yep.
Och sen har Tony gjort en specialare
Yeah, this is really cool.
för bara det här Comic Con Stockholm. Och så han tog med sig 200 stycken signerade och numrerade 200 stycken. Det är helt enkelt zombies som tar över vårt Sergels torg. Svårare än så behöver det inte vara.
Is that the Swedish chef in the background?
Ja, I think. Där är även svenska flaggan där på bikinin och lite så. Så det finns fortfarande kvar. Men efter de 200 så är det slut. Liksom.
Yeah. And you're welcome to come by the booth and
Yeah.
say hello. And Tony's happy to do signings and photos.
Och sketches. Han har med sig sketches också som är originalsketches. Liksom så.
Mm.
Jävligt bra. Känns det bra? Var det kul? Var det okej? Ja. Han var bra. En stor applåd för Tony Ward!
We might let him eat at some point. We'll see.
come watch me shove a sandwich.